Episode 1 Learning Another Language. Z.I.E. Talk with me. Z.I.E. Talk with me. Immerse yourself, express yourself, learn English naturally. Hey everyone!
Welcome to our first official episode of Z.I.E. Talk with me. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Jocelyn, and we're your hosts for this podcast.
Yes, and since the aim of our podcast is to create an immersive English environment to help students learn English, we've decided to talk about our own language learning experiences in this very first episode.
Yes, and as we want to make this episode as natural as possible, we are going entirely unscripted, meaning that we aren't reading off a script, and so that you, as learners, are able to experience a natural English conversation.
Yep, so without further ado, let's get started. Now, I think before we talk about what languages we've learnt and how we've learnt these languages, it would make more sense if we first introduced ourselves and talk about what languages we grew up speaking.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. So, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, I was born in Australia and I've lived in Australia my entire life.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, naturally, English is my native language. I grew up speaking English and I've always been in an English speaking environment. However, I do have a Malaysian heritage, and in Malaysia, there are a lot of different people. It's very multicultural, and everyone speaks different languages, but the common languages are Malay, Chinese, Tamil, English as well. Yeah,
Yes.
so there are a lot of different languages, and additionally, there's also a lot of different dialects. So
Yes.
Chinese has a lot of different dialects, and depending on the area you're from, you might speak a different dialect. So my family, my parents, they come from two areas that both speak Cantonese as the main dialect. So Cantonese is the dialect that I also grew up with, and that I also grew up speaking alongside English. So I would consider both English and Cantonese my native languages.
Oh, I would also consider English and Cantonese as my native language.
Oh, really?
Yes, because unlike you though, I was actually born in Malaysia, but I came here when I was 6 months old. Came to Australia when I was 6 months old.
Yep.
So I actually consider English and Cantonese my native languages because English was the first language I learned through the environment through school, and Cantonese is what I learned from my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were 6 months old, you probably hadn't started
Yes.
speaking back then.
No,
Yeah.
definitely had no idea what the world was going on about.
Exactly. So what was the language that you learnt?
Well, the language I actually learned was a dialect of Chinese, which was Mandarin. I started learning Mandarin when I was about 4 years old through
very young.
Chinese school, which was every Saturday. It was a 3-hour class every Saturday, and I started when I was in year one or prep, one of those years. And every Saturday we'd go to class and we'd have a Chinese school teacher and have a bunch of other students who either was from Chinese descent or from Malaysian, Southeast Asian descents, and we'd all learn Chinese together.
Yeah, that's very similar to me as well.
Yeah.
Because Mandarin Chinese is also my second language.
Oh.
Because although I grew up with Cantonese at home, I really didn't have any exposure to Mandarin Chinese until I went to school.
That's true.
And not everyday school, like Monday to Friday school. But I also went to Chinese school every Saturday. And
I think it was a common experience.
Yeah, I think it's a very common experience for many
immigrants.
Yeah, immigrants and people who do have a Chinese descent. It is very common that children go to school on Saturdays to learn Chinese.
Yes.
And I started in kindergarten.
Oh, so young.
So I started in kindergarten and I went all the way up till year 10 because I graduated earlier. I skipped a few grades and graduated early. I don't know if that was a good thing, but yeah.
So that means you were able to pick up the language quite well and quite easily. So what would your tips be for learning Chinese Mandarin?
Well, here's the thing, okay? So although I did reasonably well during Chinese school, in the earlier grades especially, I think when it comes to like learning the language, I don't think I really learnt the language until I was like in like year 11, or like year 11, year 12, or like year 11 and year 12 in Chinese school, because I graduated in year 10, but I skipped a few grades.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's different grades.
Yeah. So the reason for I say this is because when we're like learning in Chinese school, our main method of learning was basically we had this textbook, and in this textbook there was just like different Chinese texts, and every week we would read the Chinese text, and each week there would be like new Chinese vocabulary in the text that we were reading. So basically every week all we do was learn these few words, learn these new vocabulary, and like how these words are made into sentences, how they're read, etc. So basically our main form of learning for like 6-7 years was just basically learning vocabulary by reading a text. We had very, very limited exposure to anything else.
So you continued this all the way up till you graduated?
3 years before I graduated. So like not until like, yeah. It was
so
only
what
until
changed? What changed?
So actually, like I said, there was like no exposure to like listening, no exposure to speaking, no exposure to like, there wasn't even much exposure to writing. We were writing sentences.
Really?
And that's about it, because all we were doing is learning like these new vocabulary and then writing sentences with them and reading them in the text. So there was not a lot of like
it was
effective
just
learning,
repetition and forced memorization.
It was just like a lot of forced memorization, and I did it well in school because I could memorize these words really well. But the thing I found was that although I like could recognize words I saw outside, I couldn't speak the language. I couldn't really like understand it when people spoke to me. They spoke really quickly, and actually I really struggled like applying the language skills I've learned. Even though I did so well in school, I couldn't like apply it in real life. And that's why I think like language learning is definitely not about
forced
reading things in there's no forced memorization, no reading in textbooks.
I fully agree with you, because I also did Mandarin Chinese up until I graduated. So for me, we also had the forced memorization and all that, but for me, I wasn't really good at memorizing. I struggled to keep all those like complex vocabulary in my head, and I was really struggling. And then I was trying to find a way to like, if there's another way to help me learn Chinese rather than forced memorization. And that was actually true through immersing myself. So I just tried to immerse myself in like a Chinese environment. Luckily for me, when I was doing my final years of Chinese, I had a lot of Chinese friends. So I'd spend every day talking to them, because one of the components in the Chinese exam was actually speaking.
Yes. Maybe we should talk about that first.
Yes.
So basically, similar to IELTS and similar to other like English language tests like TOEFL and stuff, at the end of our schooling years, we have the option to take Chinese as a subject, like as a final year subject that would count towards our high school score, essentially.
That would determine our fates for university.
Yeah, we'll go more into that in another episode because it is a bit complicated.
Yes.
But basically, at the end of your schooling period, you have a chance to take an exam in Chinese that tests your Chinese proficiency. And this test consists of reading comprehension, listening,
essay writing, and oral.
And oral. We also had translation back in my day. But I think they got rid of it shortly after. Yes. So yeah, we also had translation, but those are like the 4 or 5 components that we had. And so obviously these are really important skills to learning language, and something that I didn't have at the beginning, because although I knew vocabulary, I was never really exposed to like all these listening or like speaking. So I had to make a change. And do you want to talk about how you improved first?
Yes. So like I said before, I had a lot of Chinese friends, not only from Chinese school but also my high school. So I had the opportunity to always converse with them in Mandarin Chinese, and they were actually very, very helpful to me, because I don't speak Mandarin Chinese at home. So the only way I could speak with someone was with my friends, and they actually helped me pick up my vocabulary, tell me when I was making grammatical mistakes and all that. And they gave me pointers and tips, which was actually very helpful. But sometimes when I didn't have my friends, I would actually go watch like Chinese TV shows, see dramas, all those podcasts, because they're actually really, really helpful. You might not always speak with your friends all the time, but being able to listen, be able to watch all those Chinese like TV shows and media actually really helped you ingrain that and feel as though you're in like a Chinese speaking environment. Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I didn't do that though. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of Chinese speaking friends that I could talk to. And again, my parents used to speak Cantonese at home. So we never really spoke Chinese. So I didn't really have anyone to talk to. The only person I could really talk to in Chinese was actually my Chinese school teacher. And she was actually really nice, because what I did while preparing for the oral component was that every day I would record myself saying a few sentences to her, and I would just send it to her, and then she would give me feedback on like my pronunciation, my grammar, like even my content as well, because I was just like saying some random things I thought of. So that was a good way to get feedback. Yeah. But again, it was quite limited because I could just talk to my teacher. And that was
that's true. You need like a diverse range of people. And even if you don't, like sometimes when I couldn't meet up with my friends, you have to go out there yourself and try and immerse yourself. Sometimes even going to like the local fish market where you hear a lot of these different languages, you can actually go and hear different languages and how they're used.
Yeah, exactly. For me though, I think that one thing that really helped me improve my Chinese, both my listening, my speaking, my writing abilities, was actually doing none of those, but actually thinking in Chinese. So I learned to like convert my brain from thinking English and thinking Cantonese to thinking in Mandarin Chinese.
Wow.
So it was actually really helpful. And I learned a lot of people, I tell this to all my students, to actually try thinking in the language that you're trying to learn.
Yes.
And it does seem very strange at first because you're so not used to it. But eventually, if you learn to think in that language, you're basically immersing yourself in that language, because everything you do revolves around that language. You're always inside your own head. You're inside your own head for most of the day. And so the best way for you to learn is to actually create that immersive environment for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thinking in Chinese was something that really helped me, because again, it forces you to use vocabulary. It forces you to speak in your brain, forces you to listen to other people and try and like convert it back into like Chinese. So that was a very helpful strategy for me. I didn't really watch any like TV shows
you didn't?
or anything, because I'm not a big fan of like watching TV shows and stuff, and I wanted to be like efficient in my studying. So I did listen to podcasts. So, like, on the way back, like on the train and stuff, I would listen to like some Chinese podcasts, some Chinese news as well. So that was quite helpful. They did speak really fast though.
Yes, they speak really fast in news like outlets for some reason.
They do. But I do find it's really helpful. Like if you do listen to something that's really fast over and over again, eventually your brain will learn to pick it up and recognize the words.
Exactly.
Which is why in this podcast we try to talk at a natural pace, even though it may seem fast for a lot of learners, particularly at the beginning. But the more you listen to us talk, the more likely you'll be able to understand it when people talk like this to you in like real life.
Yes. And also, if you still struggle to listen to really fast speakers, you can actually take a step back and listen to slower stories or basically fairy tales. What I did was I listened to children bedtime stories in Chinese, and because they're for children, they use more basic language and they speak at a slower pace. So if you want to do that, you start off with those slow like basic stories and then slowly progress. Don't go straight into extremely fast natural speaking.
You can't, but you don't have to.
Do what you can in your own ability.
I agree. Listening to like children's stories were really great for me as well. I learned a lot by listening to like children's stories at first.
And they're really interesting.
Yeah, they are. Yes. Inner child. Yes. They were really good. Another thing that I did was actually change my phone language to Chinese.
Oh, yes.
And I highly, highly recommend anyone is learning
Yes.
another language to do this.
Yes.
Because, again, we use our phones pretty much all the time. And if you've changed your phone to the language that you're learning, so change it to English, let's say, you're always going to be looking at English words, English vocabulary, and you're always going to be forcing yourself to both think in English again, as well as like recognize new words.
Exactly. So it's not just a phone you can change. You could also change your laptop, maybe even your TV.
I don't know if you can do that actually.
I think you can.
Oh,
but
I've never tried.
Yes, try and change as much as possible so you can live in that immersive environment.
Yes.
Like you have to be in the environment to enjoy it, to actually be able to learn the language properly.
Yes, exactly. Immersive environments are the best. And that is exactly why we created this podcast.
Exactly.
We're trying to contribute to your immersive environment.
Exactly.
Yes. So very important that you do that. Another thing that I actually did to help me improve my pronunciation at the start was, as part of our exam at the end of the year, we had to do a research project, an oral research project. And what I did was I actually wrote down my script for the oral, and I would put it inside a machine translator that could read out my script in Chinese for me. So what I did was I think I used Google Translate back then because that was the main technology we had. So yes, now there's a lot of different AIs they can use that sound really natural. But back then we only had Google Translate. And what I did was I put in my script into Google Translate and made Google Translate read out my script in Chinese. And I took that recording, I recorded it, and then I would play it when I went to sleep. So
passive learning.
Yeah, passive learning. I was always like listening to Chinese while I was sleeping. And apparently that's really good subconsciously, because subconsciously your brain is still awake and listening.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to like a language
while you're sleeping, it helps you memorize it better and learn it better. I did something similar to that, except I didn't do it when I was sleeping. I did it when I was sleeping on the train.
Yes.
So when I went to school, it was like a long commute to school, right? An hour-ish. And so I'd put on my headphones and like, because it was really early in the morning for me to get to school. So I just put on my headphones, go sleep, and play my oral components like you. I also recorded it and I listened to it over and over again, even though I might not hear it half the time because I'm half asleep. But it's actually going into your subconscious mind, and you can actually memorize it better and learn better.
Exactly, you can. So if any of you want to put on our podcast while you're sleeping, feel free to do so. Yes, because it may be helpful as well.
Exactly. So should we talk about what other languages you learned and what didn't go well with it?
Sure. So in addition to learning Chinese, which I will consider my successful second language I've learned, luckily, I can still speak, listen, read.
Yes.
But also it's important to keep up with that language.
Don't lose it.
Yeah, don't lose it, because I feel like once you stop engaging with that language, it's really, really easy to forget it. Particularly if you're not in that like language speaking environment.
Exactly.
So like for me, obviously I still don't really have that much exposure to Chinese in my everyday life.
Exactly.
But I try to like find articles in Chinese to read online. I try to listen to Chinese podcasts every now and then. And when I get a chance to, I try to communicate to people in Chinese.
Yes.
But again, that's a bit difficult because I don't really have a lot of people to communicate with in Chinese with.
That's true.
But yes, make sure you keep up your language. It's
Yes.
really easy to forget. So the most important thing is to keep yourself engaged with it.
Exactly. Even just listening to like 5 minutes podcast and stuff like that, every single day you'll still be able to maintain it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be like me when I learned both French and Japanese.
Oh, 2 languages.
Yes. Okay, so in school in Australia, we have to learn a language when we're in primary school and when we're in secondary school. And I had a chance, well, I didn't have a chance. I had to learn French when I was in primary school all until, and then after primary school, I learned French until year 9, I think it was. Yeah, year 9. And okay, although we were learning French, I will say that we arguably learnt nothing throughout all our French lessons.
Oh,
because
that's such
most
a shame.
of our French classes, for those 6-9 years that we were at school,
Uh-huh.
all we did was go on this language learning website,
Yeah.
and we would just go on the website and learn the language by playing the game on the website.
No.
I don't remember what it's called, but all we were doing was just playing a game in French. Our teacher was not, I mean, okay, arguably he was quite a busy person and French wasn't his priority. So all he made us do was go on this website and learn French ourselves. And naturally, when you're a kid, if you aren't like told to do something, if you're not invested in it, then you probably won't do it.
Exactly.
Which is what I did. Very bad attitude. So I just kind of neglected French. I didn't really learn anything throughout those 9 years at all.
And what a shame.
Yes. Part of me does regret it a bit because the more languages you learn, the better, obviously.
Exactly.
But for me, even till now, like language has never been my strong point. It took me a really long time to learn Chinese. And it was a lot of hard work and a lot of like repetition, a lot of listening, a lot of practice. So it did not come like easy to me.
Exactly. It's not going to come easy for everyone.
Exactly. So I'm someone right here who has absolutely no language learning talent. So I really struggle to learn languages. And for me to learn a language requires a lot of dedication, requires me to actually spend a lot of time on it. So I did not spend any time on French. And same with Japanese. Okay, I learned it for a year. Yes, I only learned it for 1 year. We only had to learn it for 1 year. And during that 1 year, yes, I did work hard because we had a really strict teacher. Okay, but my heart wasn't invested in learning Japanese. Okay, I didn't want to learn Japanese at that point. I was like, I just have to learn it for school. I don't need it for anything else. And that was the attitude I had, which is a really bad attitude because at the end of the day, I forgot everything I learned. Yeah, so I remember nothing from Japanese. I remember nothing from French. So the only language I managed to retain is Chinese because I genuinely wanted to learn Chinese. And I genuinely put in a lot of effort to learn it, to retain it. Because if you don't, then you'll forget it. Like what happened with me and French and Japanese.
That's true.
What about you?
For me, I learned Indonesian when I was in prep. But I have no idea about any of it because we just ate snacks. That's all.
Oh, really?
That's all I remember from that class, especially because I was so young. Because the class actually got cancelled after a year.
Oh, really?
We were meant to continue it all the way up to year 6, but the teacher was no longer available and the school switched to French instead. So up until from year 6 actually to year 9, I learned French as well.
Yeah, so, French is very common.
Yes, French is very common. And I also learned nothing. I remember our teacher did try to put an effort into teaching us like the basic numbers, letters, I think, seasons, all that. We did worksheets, we did some of the language learning apps and stuff, but none of it was really helpful because we only did it in the class for 50 minutes every 2 days every week, and that was it. And I never really cared about learning French either. When I was younger, I was just like, because when you're young, right, you just don't care about anything.
Exactly.
You're rebellious, you didn't care about your studies, you didn't care about your grades, you just want to make friends and all that. So no one really cared in that class, so no one picked it up.
Yeah, there
are really sad.
There are very few people who like remember the languages that they learned during high school and primary school.
Yeah.
Because everyone forgets about the language once they've graduated. Even like how I did Chinese in my final 2 years of school.
Yes.
If I hadn't like kept going after I graduated, and if I hadn't kept going now, then I wouldn't be able to speak or listen or understand Chinese. So
that's true. I do want to say though, sometimes when you're forced to learn the language and you don't enjoy it, it makes it really, really struggling to maintain your language, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's really hard to learn a language when you're being forced to.
Exactly.
So like I know a lot of students have to learn English for like exams, for IELTS, to go overseas and stuff. And yes, it is important that you do well in those exams so that you can have those opportunities. But it's also really important to change your perspective and to view language learning, to view learning English not as a chore, not as an obstacle that you have to overcome, but as part of your development. Treat it as another skill that will like open the doors to the world to you. Okay?
Exactly.
And maybe we should end by talking about one piece of advice that we'd each give to any new student learning any new language.
Yes. So would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, I say this to all my students. The best way for anyone to learn a language is always to immerse yourself in that language. I think that is really important. And actually, I think that's one of the great things about our company is that we really, really value the immersive environment. And that's why we actually created this immersive environment for students through our lessons, through our websites, through our courses, and through our teachers. We always make sure that we're communicating with you in English, that you're always seeing English words, hearing English words, so that you're always interacting with English from native English speakers as well. And so you're always having that opportunity to immerse in that language, to immerse in English. And that was my key aim when I was building this company, to create an immersive English environment, because that is the single most important thing they can do to like learn a language well.
Exactly. I also fully agree with you, because being able to immerse yourself is sometimes it's a struggle to force yourself to be immersed in that environment. But if you can do it, if you learn how to enjoy it, it will really be beneficial to you in the future, for your now, forever actually.
Yes. What you said is a great point. You have to learn to enjoy that language.
Because if you don't enjoy it and you're doing it just for the sake of it, then there's no point. You won't be able to learn it properly.
Exactly. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about in this episode or add?
I don't think so. I think that's it for now.
Yeah, I think we can end our first episode here.
Yes.
If you'd like additional help with your English, or if you have any questions or feedback for us about our podcast, please contact us and let us know. We'd love to hear your suggestions so we can improve and actually create a podcast that will best support your English learning needs.
Exactly.
So good luck with your English language learning, and we'll see you
in the next episode.
Exactly. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Bye. Z.I.E. talk with me. Z.I.E. talk with me. Immerse yourself, express yourself, learn English naturally.